I want to talk for a moment about inspiration as a photographer. You know, there are countless places where you can find inspiration for your photography to improve your composition, to improve your exposure, to improve your use of light, the colors that you use or find, shadows and depth. There's so many variables, so many little intricate things that you could adjust in your photography. And there's so many places where you can go to look for inspiration, right? And I feel like for me, I've been a photographer for over 20 years at this point, and I still enjoy looking at photography books, but I rarely these days go to photography books to look for inspiration. Okay? And I think could be I'm just tired of looking at books. Maybe? I don't know. But I think also it could be that I just enjoy movies more, right? So with that said, while I love seeing Pete Souza's photography, one of my favorite photographers of all time, I love that he's got this documentary style, which is what I like to do, which with very clean tones, which I like to do. And he's got a way with composition, which I like to do. So I relate to his work so much, and I can look at his photos all day long and just always be inspired by them and, you know, try to find things that I can improve on. Glenn E. Friedman, love his photography, skateboards, music. He was around when Tony Hawk was a kid, photographing Tony Hawk and all the others from back then. I don't know at 62 years old if he's still shooting as much as he is. I know he can be political at times, which again comes from that whole like minor threat music scene and things like that. But I love his photography, his music photography, his skateboard photography has inspired a lot of my work over the years. Ansel Adams, I mean, who is not inspired by his attention to detail with black and whites? By the way, I have books from all three of these people, and I do look at their books from time to time to just refresh the inspiration from them. But I love watching movies, and I find oftentimes I can be more inspired from watching movies than I can from reading a book. And maybe it's the moving picture aspect, maybe it's the moving light aspect, but I find that oftentimes I get a new idea for color in light, or I get a new idea for composition, framing from the movies, from the TV shows. So two TV shows as an example. Ozark, the deep blues, dark, moody. I love that look. Now, I don't often shoot that way or edit that way, but I love it, and it's so inspiring. Handmaid's Tale, sometimes dark, sometimes bright, always this sort of like nostalgic, like cool but slightly warm toned look to it. Love the style of the cinematography in that show. But I'm also a big Star Wars fan. Huge use on light with effects more than light and color for the ambiance, right? There are often times where there are ambiance where it is the light, the styling, the LUTs, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I just love Star Wars overall, right? So movies, TV shows, that gets me every time. Just the other day, I was rewatching the original X-Men movie with Hugh Jackman, right? The original with actual people in it, not the cartoon. And my daughter is watching this with me, and she's trying to understand the story while I'm just examining and admiring the compositions and the lights and the colors that they use and all that. And, you know, we get inspired by different ways, of course. I'm not saying books are the wrong way. I mean, look at Flack Photo, right? Andy's been around for years with this like book club and sharing photography books from all over the world, and his collection is huge. But we all have different ways of getting inspired. Some just from going for a walk, right? I've been doing this 3-mile photo walk for years. I love it. And I can link to that in the description from this episode if you don't know what that means. But for me, lately, it's been movies and TV shows that the more artistic ones that really get me. Here's a good example. Years ago, when I was in high school, I was watching CSI Miami, CSI Las Vegas, CSI New York. And what was so interesting, what Jerry Bruckheimer did was CSI Miami was very red and orange and like this like goldish color, right? CSI New York was very blue, very much like Ozark in a way. And CSI Las Vegas was like the purples and the greens and the blues and the neons, and it was everywhere, but it was very, very Las Vegas, right? So your mind went to the location of the show. And then when, again, Jerry Bruckheimer's brilliance for his directing and whatnot is that when there was a crossover between, for example, Miami and New York, when the main character from Miami was on screen, he was always in the sun. And it was like bright and reddish orange, right? Golden hour, always on him. And when the main character from New York was on, he was in the shadows. He was inside. It was very dark and blues and cool toned. And when they were next to each other, both on camera, it continued. They figured out a way to make that look good. And that is the kind of stuff that inspires me. When you see that happen, yes, you can see that happen in a book. You can see that happen at an art gallery. But there's something for me that when I see it in a movie or see it in a TV show, it sticks more for some reason. Lately, at least. So anyway, I'm curious about you and what inspires you. Where do you find your inspiration? So if you're listening on Spotify, you can just comment. Comment on this episode. If you don't use Spotify and you want to do it on Good Pods or Podchaser, you can do it there. Apple Podcasts, you can't comment on an individual episode yet. But comment or send me a message on Threads or on Twitter, X, whatever, wherever. Just mention me at Scott Wyden. I really want to know, where do you find your inspiration? Thanks for listening.